David Helman. I really appreciate you coming on. You've been such a cool guy, such a nice guy to me. So I really thank you for coming on the platform, man.
Any problem, dude? Missing you out here at the show. It hasn't been as lively since you took off.
Oh man, I really appreciate that. I definitely miss being there, chopping it up with you guys. The off-air conversations were like my favorite part because you get to just hear so many different opinions, and you guys, the way you guys conversate, the way you guys just talk about and game plan for the show was my favorite part of the whole experience.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think I agree. Yeah, we got a good group of people, and it's fun just kind of chopping it up with everybody.
But let's talk about you for a second. So I'm like, man, Dave, I got to give you your flowers. So obviously, I got to experience what it's like talking with you and seeing kind of your experience and how you approach the industry. But not everyone gets that behind the scenes look. So have you always been this very humble, nice guy, no matter what you've done in life?
Oh man, I don't know how to answer a question like that.
You before, huh?
I just every time somebody says that I'm like super humble or nice, I just imagine there's somebody out there that's like, oh, this guy sucks. I need to go back to therapy for that. There's probably some trauma there.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I don't feel comfortable sitting here talking about how cool and humble I think I am, but
humble answer right there.
yeah, but like I think I've been fortunate enough. I've been working in journalism since I was like 18. I mean, I'm 30. I'm about to be 34. So like it's not an exaggeration to say like half of my adult or like half of my life and like my entire adult life. And really every step of the way people have been so good to me, cool to me, like people that didn't need to be helping me learn the ropes, taking me under their wing, teaching me things, whether that was people in college when I was at LSU, like people that I met there who were working like in LSU media, who helped me, professors, mentors, whatever, all the way up through my time like covering the Cowboys. I mean, the number of like friends and mentors I made over the course of my career when I was there, and then even like right now, like people like Joy Taylor and Emmanuel Acho have just been like nothing but gracious and helpful to me. So I say all that to say that I just try to pay that forward. Like I want to be that person for somebody else. I try to be. And if that means that I'm humble and cool, then that's awesome. But I'm really just trying to be as good to the next generation as people were to me.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely do. So your story. So you told me a little bit about it off air, but just for my audience listening, how did you fall in love with the game, and when did you know, okay, this is what I want to do? Like, was there like a moment? Was there like a certain high school game that you went to? Was it a college game you went to, or maybe you saw it on TV in the living room on a Thanksgiving? But when did you know? You know what? I really want to get involved with covering the game.
Well, I mean, you might be able to relate to this since you're a Florida guy. I
Uh-oh.
mean, I was born in the Gulf South, and I just think, I mean, football is like ingrained in your blood
Yeah.
when you're from that part of the country. It just is what it is. Like, I don't even remember consciously choosing to like football. It was just like always there. For like from the time I was old enough to know what it was, I loved football. I wanted to be around it. I wanted to watch it all the time. So like that part was easy. I didn't really have to think about that. And then like when I got older, uh, you know, I'm not the biggest, most athletic person. If you've ever seen me, I think you would agree. So like at a pretty young age, I was like, okay, playing football is not gonna be how I make it. Like that's not in the cards for me. And it was really as simple as just being like, well, how else could I be around football? How else could I be around sports if I'm not good enough to play them? And I've always kind of have had a natural aptitude for reading and writing. It's just something that I realized I was pretty good at from a young age. So like it's really cliche, and I always say like it's kind of annoying because I would say as early as like the age of 10 or 12, it just kind of clicked for me where I was like, oh shit, like they'll pay you to watch and write about the games. Like that sounds like the dream.
No brainer.
Yeah, and literally it wasn't any more difficult than that. Like by the time I got to high school, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And like I worked on the student newspaper in high school. I worked on the student newspaper in college. I had internships. I did, I did a lot of the same stuff that you've been able to do, which you did it better than me. Like, getting an internship at Fox Sports, like all the way across the country. That's next level. That's really impressive. But yeah, but just like taking every opportunity that I could get. But yeah, like it's not that interesting of a story, and I feel very lucky because I just sort of it just kind of clicked for me at like a molecular level when I was really young. I was like, well, if I want to be around sports and I'm not a great athlete, this is probably the best way to do it, and it worked out.
That's awesome. Because one thing that I've noticed speaking with a lot of people, or not even just in the media industry, but just people in general, a hard thing that people have is finding what they want to do in life. Like I feel like that's kind of like a half the puzzle. Then once you figure out that piece, then obviously you pursue it. But it's always interesting and fascinating to me when I ask people that question, because maybe it's a professional athlete and I ask them, when did you know you had a shot at making the NBA or the NFL? Like there's always a moment in someone's life. So for you, immediately you knew you kind of drifted towards writing. So once you explored that avenue, obviously you've done tremendous work for the Dallas Cowboys. What was that aspect like? Because, like you said, you've been in the media industry for a while. So that part of your life, writing and what you still do write, what was that like to finally write and you're being a part of the biggest brand in all of the United States with the Dallas Cowboys? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, like the reason that I say it's annoying is because so much of it fell into place very easily for me. There's no other way to say it. And like I worked hard. I worked all the way through college. Like I was working in student media by my second semester in college. So like, I was working a lot of weekends. I was covering a lot of sporting events. I you know I so I did work hard, but like it fell into place so simply to the point where um a job came open with the Cowboys. I think I'd been out of school for 2.5 years, and I'd already been laid off by a job. So I was fighting, trying to get my resume in front of people, trying to find a new job, and
Mm-hmm.
the Cowboys had an opening, and um, I had a friend of mine recommend. They'd looked at three or four other people, and it had not worked out. And I had a friend finally say that they should look at my resume, which whenever I talk about my career, I tell people all the time, like networking is so important. Like you have to have the resume, you have to prove to people that you can do the job well, but like so many opportunities that have come my way have been because of friends that I made along the way. And that goes back to my other point. Um like be nice to as many people as you can because you never know when those friendships are going to turn around and benefit you. And I'm not trying to say that's the only reason you should be nice is because of what you can get out of it,
Right.
um but man, like it's crazy what having like a robust social circle and a robust group of friends who are willing to go to bat for you. It's crazy the impact that can have on your life. So anyway, um I wound up getting that job, and it's crazy. So I think the Cowboys hired me when I was 24, and so at the age of 24, you're writing, talking, podcasting about the biggest team in sports, the biggest fan base, the biggest audience, the biggest platform. And I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about because like when you're in college, you're like, man, I'll take any job. Like I'll go cover Alabama prep football and write stories about Hoover High that maybe 500 people will read. And I mean, I did that. I did that in Louisiana. I covered prep sports. I covered college sports. But like, you just get used to the idea of like, man, it's going to be a grind. Like, it's going to take years to get to this level where people actually care what I have to say. And then like by the time I was 25, I had a major platform covering America's team. So
Wow.
it's wild where this job can take you and how quickly it can happen. It doesn't work that way for everybody, which is why, I always say I'm sure my story is kind of annoying, and I've been very, very fortunate in the way that a lot of it has clicked for me. Um, but I will say, regardless of how quickly it happens, like the people that I know that do good work have seen it click for them at one point or another. I have friends where it took a decade for them to reach that level. I have other friends like me that were able to pull it off at a fairly young age. Um, so there's no one way to do it, but yeah, for me it's remarkable. Like I said, I don't like the word easy, but there was a striking simplicity with how well some of it all kind of fell into place for me.
Yeah, and to give yourself credit though, I've seen how hard you work, and like you said, just being a good person. And that sounds cliche, but I can just vouch to this from just the time that I've been. And so I'm 24 now, but I've been doing media since I was 18, with the podcast and local radio and covering the Magic. And not to throw any one person under the bus or anything like that, but I've definitely embraced the. Not everyone has that nice guy approach. Not everyone's willing to help the young guy up and coming. And I've experienced that end of things. So when I see the way that you approach people and the way that you navigate, I think good things tend to happen to good people. And so that's kind of the energy you attract when you're nice to good people. So got to definitely give yourself more credit there. But let's dive into the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, they just won 54-19, but that wasn't the score going into the fourth quarter. One thing that I've always credited you for, and I'm like, man, you do such a good job at this, is you're not hyperbolic whatsoever. You're like, okay, this game doesn't end everything for us, and it isn't the whole world for us if we win. Like, it's not everything. Like, you're able to take things with perspective. So, with Dallas, obviously, the Jerry Jones with the bigger personality than life, it's the star. Every game seems to be a make or break, and I feel like you always do a great job of kind of stepping back and like, let's just assess the situation for what it is and not how you feel. What do you make game to game of Dallas? What have you made of them so far? And then obviously their win over the Colts.
Yeah, well, I think you have to adopt that strategy with the Cowboys after they've burned you enough times. Like I've covered at least 3 Cowboys seasons where it was like, oh, this might be the year. Like,
Yeah.
and obviously it hasn't been the year. So I think you learn not to overreact too much after enough disappointments or after enough surprise endings. And so that's where I am with the Cowboys. I wrote last night, and it's kind of been this way since Dak came back. I mean, there's let's not downplay how impressive it is. Like the Cowboys didn't have their starting quarterback for 5 weeks,
Yeah.
and they lead the league in offense, they lead the league in third down efficiency. Now that they after this Colts game, they are the leaders in point differential in the entire league. I think they're plus 127.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're very, very impressive. They've beaten the hell out of everyone that they've played since Dak came back. Like it's pretty remarkable. But having said that, it reminds me, I wrote last night, it reminds me of watching like a college team, like an Ohio State, where they just have all this talent and they're so much better than the teams that they're playing. But they keep finding ways to like muck it up.
Right.
There have been consistent themes here, whether you want to talk about run defense and tackling. The most troubling one, obviously, is turnovers, particularly from Dak. He's thrown an interception, I believe, in 5 of the 6 games that he's played since he came back. He's got 7 on the season. And when you wind up winning 54-19, it's easy to be like, "Oh, who cares? Who cares about that?" But it's troubling because we saw this from the Cowboys last year, and it got them beat in their first game in the playoffs. So there's a sloppiness to their game that I really think they need to find a way to clean up. It is nice, like when you have a pass rush that can do that, that can sack the quarterback 3 times and force 5 turnovers. It covers up a lot of stuff,
Yep.
but playing the way I would say, really 5 out of their 6 games. So the Vikings game, they basically played a perfect game. No notes on that.
Right.
But in every other game, you've seen similar mistakes. I mean, it took them to the fourth quarter last night to really kind of put it together. They played around with the Giants for 2.5 quarters. They played pretty atrocious defense against the Bears. Dak also had a pick in that game. And it's easy to forget, like, the Lions were driving to potentially tie or take the lead in the fourth quarter of their game. So, like, consistently, they've played sloppy enough to like stress you out in 5 of these 6 games. And it's like, all right, what are the odds that you can get away with this against the Phillies or the San Franciscos of the world, or in a world where they're good enough to make it to the Super Bowl? How are you going to feel playing that way against Kansas City or Buffalo or Cincinnati?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a recipe for success. So now, having said all of that, like, it's crazy impressive that in the NFL you can play kind of a shitty game for 2 or 3 quarters and then win by 30 points. Like, that's not supposed to happen.
Mm-mm.
So it clearly speaks to how good they are. But there's an underlying current of error prone play where I'm like, I don't think this is going to have a happy ending if y'all don't do something about this.
Okay, so a two-part question for you because you can't blame just one person, right? So yeah, Dak is throwing the interception, but when you mention sloppy play, like that's not all on Dak. So it's funny how winning heals all wounds. At first, we're like, oh, Mike McCarthy, he's not the guy for the job. We don't like Mike McCarthy. He's not well coached. You see what happened in Green Bay. But then when you're winning, it's like, oh, maybe we were wrong about Mike McCarthy. It's just funny how that happens. But when you talk about sloppy play, how much of that, what do you make of Mike McCarthy in his position right now, coaching the Cowboys? Is this kind of a reflection of maybe his approach to the game or his coaching style? Is that something that he can tighten up? And secondly, the macro question would be, what the way this team is currently constructed, if they were to play the perfect brand of football, if they did tighten everything up in a perfect world, could you tell Dallas Cowboy fans confidently, I believe that you have a shot to at least go to the Super Bowl? You could say that.
Okay, so I mean, I'll the second one's a loaded question, so
Right.
I'll get there. Um, I mean, for better or for worse, I look at Mike McCarthy as a CEO type of coach. Like, I don't think Mike McCarthy is like making the difference in the little things that happen on game day. Like,
Okay.
do I think Mike McCarthy is working with the offensive linemen on fixing their technique in just the right way to cut down on the holding penalties? No. Same thing with the special teams miscues. They had a big special teams penalty last night. I think Mike McCarthy, like I said, he's a CEO coach. I think he delegates to his assistant coaches, trusts them to get the job done, oversees the game plan. I think it sounds silly, but I think Mike McCarthy's biggest contribution is monitoring what his guys are doing, like how much work they're doing during the week. Like, are your legs fresh enough? Do we need to dial practice back today? Do we need to cut
Right.
some plays out of the practice script? I think that's what Mike McCarthy's really good at. Um, and maybe that sounds like an insult because ideally you want this X's and O's guy who's doing all this crazy work to change the outcome on Sunday. I just don't think that's where McCarthy is at this point in his career. I think he's done a good job though. Like he gets out of the way of his assistant coaches. And I think the culture of the team is really strong. But yeah, it like I said, there is a trend where you're like, man, some of these mistakes just don't seem like they're getting corrected from week to week. Now, as far as Dak goes, I think when you get to year 7 of your NFL career, I have a hard time putting it on coaching. Like, Dak Prescott knows what he's looking at. He knows what he's doing. Um, I don't know how effectively you're coaching turnovers and things out of a franchise quarterback's play. I think Dak is a naturally confident, aggressive player. And sometimes I think too much so. Like, sometimes I feel like he's trying to prove people wrong as he's throwing the
Mm.
ball. And I don't think that is a great way to make decisions on the field. And then on top of that, I don't think Dallas's personnel is as amazing as it has been at times during his career. You know, you lose Amari Cooper, you don't have
Yep.
him this year. Um, you've got they've been good this year, but like your tight end position is a little bit unproven. You saw a costly penalty from the rookie Jake Ferguson last night. Um, Dalton Schultz is a good player, but I think Dalton Schultz has dropped like 3 touchdowns over the last like month or so. You see Michael Gallup falls down in a route last night and it leads to the interception from Stephon Gilmore. Just stuff like that where um Dak is used to making very confident decisions, and I don't know that the personnel is where it needs to be to play that way. Um, and I mean, he would probably argue with that, but the results speak for themselves. I mean, it's funny. This is something I've talked about with Acho on our show. Is like Emmanuel's like, well, Dak is good for like a turnover a game, and I'm like, I can't argue with you right now because he is, but like that hasn't historically
Been the case.
that's not his game. I think he's only thrown like 56 picks in 100 games, so his average for his career is like a pick every other game, and right now he's averaging a pick a game. So something changed. It's probably a little bit of both. Dak being a little more aggressive than he needs to be, combined with his personnel not being able to make him right when he does play aggressively. So it's something to watch there. I don't know what changes or what needs to change, but I just don't think you're going to get where you want to go averaging an interception in game. Now as far as the other one, it's actually, it's not as crazy a question as it sounded. I mean, on pay, if the Cowboys can string together like 3 good games, I think this team is good enough to go to a Super Bowl. They have all of the things that a Super Bowl team need. Like they have a wonderful defense. Most
Right.
importantly, they have a pass rush. Like they have a pass rush that can make life difficult on a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, which is a very, very, very valuable thing. They've got an amazing running game. We know running games travel in the playoffs, and they've got a quarterback who, and Dak isn't even having his best season by a long stretch, but they have a quarterback who is capable of not losing you the game. So you add all those 3 things together. Yeah, I mean, on paper, I think this team definitely has it has the necessary components to make that type of run.
Right.
Now, do I think you should trust them to do that? Not really. A, because of the inconsistency we've seen all season, and B, because it's the Cowboys. I mean, there's a certain part of me that's just not going to believe it's possible until it happens.
Right.
But I do think that they're capable. I just don't think I trust them.
Okay. Very quickly, I'm no psychologist by any means, but like when you listen to things enough and you look at things enough, so he's been overlooked, right, for a greater part of his career. Obviously, he had to fight for his position, drafted late. It seems like he tries to fit the ball in certain windows that aren't there. But maybe that's just what it took to get to that point. Like you have to have that chip on your shoulder to want to prove people wrong when you've been overlooked for so long. So I don't know. But to your point, what's interesting is he wasn't always like that. So it's not like he came into the league doing that. So the fact that it kind of changes now is an interesting approach. On like that's the weird part for me that I can't figure out.
That's a really interesting point because yeah, he wasn't like that as a young guy. Like he was the king of just taking what was
Yeah.
available to him. But the other thing I would say though is like again over time, I think he has seen he's been able to play that way. Like if you go back and watch, like with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, C.D. Lamb, at other times in his career, Des Bryant, like he's had receiver play that enabled him to do that. Like I can go pull up a dozen clips from the last few years where Dak is just rocketing the ball down the seam and picking up 20, 25, 28 yards at a time over the middle of the field with receivers making these great catches. it just hasn't been happening this year. Like a play that we've seen go as a completion for 25 yards will get batted up into the air and intercepted, or the receiver won't come down with the catch. So that's not to like let Dak off the hook, but I feel like in past years Dak could be aggressive and get away with it, and this year his receivers aren't playing that way and he's not adjusting for it. Like rather than being like, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't be trying these throws," he's like, screw it. Let's just keep going after it and eventually it'll click. But as of yet, it's not clicking.
Right. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so let's get right into this one. Before we get into Jimmy G, Joe Burrow's undefeated against Patrick Mahomes. I don't know how much you make or take away from that aspect. I've done a quarterback to NBA player comparisons, like Aaron Rodgers to Kevin Durant, which Kevin Durant didn't like, by the way. He made sure he commented on it. So then we have, I almost think Patrick Mahomes is a little like Steph Curry. I know he's a little bit younger than where Steph Curry is at his career, but just how they play so carefree and effortless, and just there's no one that could really play the way they play. But I haven't really done one for Joe Burrow, and I'm still working on that. But he just has these moments. It takes a very special player to want to live in those moments. Like he likes the bright lights when the game is on the line, and he always stays at his level or above it. And I think Derek Jeter said something like that. Like a clutch player isn't necessarily someone that knows how to elevate their game in those moments, but to not shrink and stay at where they're at. And he always is able to stay where he's at or above. What do you make of Joe Burrow's recent level of play and Cincy? Because when you said earlier, you did mention Cincy maybe possibly coming out of the AFC when you talked about a Super Bowl matchup. What are you thinking of that team right now?
I mean, I don't know how you don't include the Bengals after what we saw yesterday. So, I mean, they started 0-2, they figured it out, and now they're 8-2 since that start, and they
Yeah.
just beat. I mean, I would have said the Chiefs are the best team in the league leading up until yesterday. I just think so highly of the Chiefs. Um, and like they won by 3, but like there was nothing fluky about that game. Like
Right.
they played so well, and what I think is even more impressive is the Bengals calling card since Joe got there has been explosive plays. Like, oh, 10, 15-yard completion to Jamar Chase, run after catch, touchdown. That didn't happen that much yesterday. I think like they had one really explosive play, but like for the most part, they were just methodically moving the ball downfield. They had a great day running the ball, which we don't associate the Bengals as a great run team, but even without Joe Mixon, I mean, Samaje Perine ran for 100 yards yesterday. They were picking up third and short after third and short on the ground. And then Joe just making the right decision every single time. And yeah, I mean, I struggle to come up with an NBA comp. Honestly, I think Steph could be a good comp for Joe as well because
Ooh.
I mean Steph's not this like crazy big athletic guy like people always talk about. He's not like the most physically impressive looking player. Joe
Right.
Burrow doesn't have this like crazy rocket arm. His arm is pretty average by NFL standards, but when the moment comes, man, like he lives for it. Like he almost has this like I don't want to call the guy like a sociopath or anything, but like it's like he doesn't even feel the emotions of the moment. Like
Yeah.
he's completing a 3rd and 11 pass to clinch the game with the same degree of coolness that I'm like taking the milk out of the fridge. You know what I
Give
mean?
me a Lillard maybe. Live up to the moment. He hasn't won a championship yet.
See,
Curry. Yeah.
I whatever. I mean, yeah, if you got to have a championship, but I mean, and look, I know college isn't the NFL, but
Right.
I've seen Joe do this on so many big stages. Like
Right. Right. Right.
he's done it. He won a championship in college. Like he played out of his mind down the stretch of that season. He led the Bengals on a run through the playoffs. He's beaten the Chiefs. He's 3-0 against the Chiefs, which is a pretty incredible stat. So,
Man,
I mean, he hasn't won a championship, but
he will.
I just, unfortunately, as much as I want to say that that's true, I don't think you can guarantee that. Um, but man, he's so cool under pressure. He's so good in the moment where it's like it could be 3rd and 8 and the pocket collapses and he just looks like he's going to get the newspaper. Like it doesn't even look like it phases him. So yeah, I don't know how you don't include the Bengals on your short list based on that type of performance. And it's early. It's well, I mean, it's not early is not the right word. I guess I should say like we'll see if he can keep this going. But like, so Joe still has to play Tom Brady. He's got
Yep.
a game against Josh Allen, and then they play the Ravens to wrap up the season.
Mm,
Like, if Joe keeps doing what he's doing, I think you have to include him in the MVP conversation. He would
hey,
obviously be like he would be a late riser, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I mean, his
uh,
stats are right up there with like any other guy that you want to consider for that award. So I really like if he so what they have 5 games left, right? Yeah, they have 5 games left. If he plays at this level for the rest of the year and they win 4 of their last 5 or whatever, I absolutely think he'll be in the conversation.
right, absolutely. And when we talk about the best quarterbacks, of course, Mahomes and Allen seem to dominate that conversation, especially in the beginning of the year, at least. We have to put some respect on Joe Burrow's name when we think of the best quarterbacks at that point now, because just the way that he plays against those type of guys when it matters most.
Well, and I think Joe was kind of like lost in the shadows for a little bit because like you start 0-2, and then even they got back to 2-2, and then they immediately lost again. So I mean, when you're 2-3 after 5 weeks, I think people just kind of forget about you. But that's what I mean. It sounds so boring, like you were talking about earlier. Like I try to never overreact to anything, but like that's why it's silly the way we get worked up about things in October because I mean it's a long season and not everybody follows the same trajectory. Like the Bengals at this time last year were doing this. They weren't even this good. They finished the season 10-7,
Yeah.
and we saw what happened. So I try to keep that in mind where I'm like every team is having its own separate season and like each team's success isn't linear. Like somebody might not figure out the best way to play for them until December, and
Right.
that's okay. But in this instant reaction world, I feel like that gets lost. Like people want to have an opinion about everything immediately. Like God, I don't even want to know how many. If I was petty enough to do it, I don't care. I'm not going to. But if I was petty enough to do it, we could go back and find so many tweets
Oh,
about how awful the Bengals were when they lost to the Cowboys back in week 2 and oh, I guess the Bengals were a flash in the pan, like all that type of shit. And it's like, no, football is just really hard and it takes time to figure out and here we are.
you're a smart man. The last thing I want to throw at you, by the way, Baker Mayfield just got cut. Well, I guess we can maybe throw that at the end. But Jimmy G out for the season. You hate to see this. I hate injuries. It's like the worst thing in sports. But if it being available is also a skill, and like availability is the best ability. But the 49ers went all in. They felt like they have a Super Bowl ready roster, all aggressive wins. Obviously, Trey Lance went down. You have Jimmy G. He's playing. You're winning. I don't believe their record reflected how good they were, but now he's out. Obviously, it's about you don't want to see it, but what do you make of the 49ers situation now? Like, what does your future look like now going forward for the 49ers?
Well, it's obviously a bummer and it sucks for Jimmy and yeah, I mean mainly the main thing is I'm just like, man, yeah, I hate to see that. It's nobody should have to deal with that. That sucks, but I don't think we can close the book on the Niners just yet. I mean, I think they're that talented. Again, I mean, I cover the Dallas Cowboys. We watched them go 5
Yeah,
and 0 with Cooper or 4-0, whatever the record was. We watched them win a lot of games with Cooper Rush as their quarterback. And the Niners have a better overall roster than the Cowboys do.
agree.
I mean, we're talking about a team that just held the Dolphins to 17 points, like maybe the scariest offense in the league, or certainly one of them. And before that, they had shut out 4 straight opponents in the second half. I mean, that's rare air. So when you have a defense that can do that, I can't rule you out at all. So whether it's Brock Purdy or shoot, maybe they go after Baker Mayfield, I have no idea. But like you could you can win games without a game-changing quarterback in San Francisco. I mean, that's Jimmy G. That's what we've been arguing about for years. Like Jimmy G is not the reason for that team's success. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Like do they trust Brock Purdy enough, or do they go try to get somebody else, whether it's Baker Mayfield or like another vet that's on the street or something like that? It's going to be interesting, but like I'm not writing the Niners off at all. Um, but it does suck that Jimmy. This has to be it for Jimmy in San Francisco. Like I would imagine we're not going to see him in a Niners uniform ever again. So it sucks that that's the way that it ends. Just kind of like getting hurt in the first quarter of a game, and then like, oh shit, it's over. But yeah, that's a bummer. Hopefully we'll see him bounce back somewhere else.
Before, I don't know if you have the MVP take, but before we get into that, Lamar also, I almost forgot this. Lamar's out he left the game. He was out for the game. I've compared him to John Morant because like that, just must see TV. There's no one more entertaining. That type of speed, you just can't like it. My grandma doesn't watch football, for example. I mean, she loves Tom Brady to death. It's Tiger Woods, LeBron James, Tom Brady. That's all she'll watch. Maybe some Walking Dead. I don't know why, but regardless, when John Morant plays, like you could just tell, oh, that guy's different. When Lamar plays, that guy's just different. He's just a different speed than everyone else. It doesn't take rocket science to see that. What do you do in Lamar's circumstance? Because obviously this is a sensitive time with contract negotiations. He's going to get paid, maybe not the amount that he's seeking, but I've heard a couple people say, oh, I'm not playing now. Like I want to get paid. And now look, I can get injured. What do you make of that situation with Lamar?
I think it's a lot of noise about nothing. Lamar, for starters, Lamar Jackson's a competitor. Like that guy, I have a hard time believing Lamar Jackson is going to quit on a playoff team. You know, the Ravens are 8-4. And we're all super hype on the Bengals right now, and rightfully so. But the Ravens still lead that division. The Ravens have already beaten the Bengals. So like Lamar's not going to quit on a team like that. And if he did, I think like doing that would reflect way more poorly on your chances of getting paid, in my opinion, than getting hurt.
Agree.
I covered Dak Prescott. He broke his ankle completely in half. Needed, it's a 6-month, 7-month rehab, and he still got every dime he was looking for. Like I have a hard time believing there aren't a lot of injuries that would keep Lamar Jackson from getting paid. Honestly, I believe that. So he's gonna play and he's gonna be fine. Like I don't foresee this like really affecting his earning potential at all. I think he'll come back when he can. I would guess the Ravens will get to the playoffs one way or another, and then we do this whole song and dance again in the offseason. I'll bet you $5 right now the Ravens franchise tag him, and we spend the offseason debating the price.
Right. Absolutely. All right. It's time. My MVP take. You even mentioned it. I was like, dang, you beat me to it. Joe Burrow's in my MVP conversation. And that's what I was going to mention. And I don't even know if that's necessarily a bold take, but when we think of the MVPs all year, I mean, obviously there's more than just the quarterbacks, but we know a quarterback's most likely going to get the reward. The Mahomes, the Hurts, the Allens. I believe Burrow or the Tua. People talk about Tua. I think Burrow's right up there amongst all of them. I think Mahomes was number one, but then, like you said, after last night, Burrow to me could win the MVP this year. That would be my MVP take. Do you have yours?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I'll go as far as to say this. I think we're going to see a new MVP this year. Because I think for Patrick Mahomes to win another one, I think you have to be so unquestionably great, because voters don't like repeats. That's why there's only been one repeat Heisman winner. It's very rare to see a repeat MVP, and that, Aaron Rodgers had to play out of his damn mind to pull that off. So I mean, voters don't like to do it anyway. And Patrick Mahomes is having a great season, but I don't know that he's having such a great season that it's like undeniable who the MVP is, especially since he just lost a game to a guy who is also in that conversation. So here, I would say Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, I think whichever one of the three of them has the hottest finish to the season, I think will be your MVP. And I do think, like, look around the league. The Bills have had this cold stretch where they haven't looked that great. The Chiefs just lost their third game of the year. And then meanwhile, the Eagles just keep plugging away. Like, they lost that
Mm-hmm.
one game and the sky was falling, and then they righted the ship and they've won three straight. The Cowboys are the only game left on their schedule that really gives you pause. Like, even, I mean, I know the Giants have a winning record, but the Eagles should easily beat the Giants both times. So I mean, if the Eagles go like 15-2 or 16-1, like, don't write off the possibility of Jalen Hurts being your MVP. Like, I think a lot of people kind of dismiss that because his numbers aren't like super gaudy, but what they are is like incredibly efficient. And if
Right.
he keeps playing that way and the Eagles only lose like one game all year, crazier things have happened. So that's my I guess I don't know how bold that is, but I think one of those three, Hurts, Hurts, Burrow, or Allen. That's who I would ride with to win the MVP.
All right. I know Shady's making sure you're aware of how good the Eagles are doing. I know that's a
They're
daily thing.
great. Yeah. Oh, Shady thinks I hate the Eagles because he hates the Cowboys, and it's just not true. But I'll keep fighting that good fight.
Dave, listen, I really appreciate your time. It's always an honor to speak with you and talk with you and pick your brain. So whenever you want to come on, you just let me know. If I ever come back out to LA, I'll certainly let you know. But before I let you go, where can angry fans message you and follow you and all the above, anything you have upcoming? Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm on Speak on FS1 every weekday, Monday to Friday, with Emmanuel Acho, Shady McCoy, and the wonderful Joy Taylor. So please come find us there and let us know what you think of all of our takes. And I'm on Twitter 24/7 at David Helman _. Yeah, come yell at me on there too. That's totally fine.
We need to get you on TikTok as well. I'm telling you, you got the brain for it.
I use TikTok, but I don't make TikToks. And that's really, like, I know you're right. Like, I probably should, but like, TikTok is my safe space. Like, TikTok is where I go to be entertained by other people's content
Right, right,
instead of making my own.
right.
So maybe one day we'll see.
Well, listen, I appreciate you, David Hellman. Until next time, we'll talk soon.